Welcome to Asking Questions. That's right, a brief chance for you to test your IQ. Let's go over the ground rules. We're gonna ask you one question. Then you're gonna have 10 seconds to come up with the answer, but don't share it. At the sound of the buzzer, we'll reveal the answer. Let's get started. How many fireworks-related injuries are there per day in the month of July in the United States? Is it 260, 533, 800, or 1,000? Whoa, who's in the winner's circle? I know that I definitely got that answer wrong. Don't forget to join us after the gathering for Better Together snacks. And don't forget to get your kids. Let's get ready for the message.
Well, we are glad you're with us. My name's Aaron, and wherever you're joining us from in Odenton or Annapolis or online, we are glad that you're here today. I hope you did have a great holiday this past week and that you had 0 firework-related injuries. That's kind of the number I'm shooting for as a personal goal. Although I was with a lot of young children and a lot of sparklers, which is a bad combination. I don't know if those count as injuries, but there were quite a few of them. It's a terrifying combination. But anyway, with that trivia question, it's obviously just for fun, but it sets us up to talk about our theme for the series that we're going to be in over the next couple of weeks this summer. And the theme that we're in is the questions of Jesus. The questions of Jesus. And before we get to that specifically, I just want to talk about questions in general. Have you ever been asked a question that changed your life? Question that changed your life. Maybe somebody asked you, hey, do you want to come work for me? Or how soon can you get to the hospital? Or do you promise not to tell anyone? Or will you marry me? Okay? These are questions that can alter our reality because they change our lives or they change the direction of our life. Or maybe for you, it was that you asked a question. You asked a question and the answer that you got would change the way that you think about the world, or maybe that way that you perceive yourself because you learned something maybe about yourself that wasn't so pretty, right? I had an experience like this where a number of years ago I was a campus pastor at another church and I was working with a summer intern. And this guy was really remarkable, an extremely gifted guy. He had gone to college early. It was after his freshman year. He was going into ministry. He came to spend the summer with our church, and I got to work with him over the course of those 8 or 10 weeks. And he was honestly very gifted. Like in a number of ways, I was all summer thinking like, wow, oh my goodness, I wish that I had had the experiences and the skills that this guy had at his age. Like, man, he's doing great work. It was super fun to be able to have him integrated with our campus. And at the end of the summer, we had sort of an overview feedback time where I had compiled some thoughts to hopefully help him continue to improve. And we did that whole thing, and he received it really well. And then at the end of it, I asked a question, which is a standard practice, I guess, but one that's a little bit terrifying, where I asked him, like, hey, so what was it like to be on the other side of me? In other words, like, when over the summer, when you got a call from me, you look down at your phone and it's my face all big on your phone, and you're about to answer, what do you feel? What's it like to be on the other side of me? And again, this guy was really, I had been super impressed with his work all summer, but he gave me some feedback that was not only very humbling, but kind of shocking, and that he was willing to say it. I was impressed with that. He just said, hey, look, it was really fun to work together this summer. I had a great experience, I really feel like I learned a lot. But he said, I wish that you had told me one time, just one time, that something that I gave to you was good enough on the first go. And I was like, ouch, okay. Remember, in my mind, I'm like, this kid's super gifted. And in his mind, he's like, nothing I ever did was good enough for Aaron. So what was like a feedback session from me as an older person in ministry down for him, this younger guy coming up in ministry, turned into a therapy session for me from him, where we were like exploring core memories and why it is that I'm so controlling and I'm weeping and he's comforting me. And it's like, I don't think that's how it was supposed to go. They didn't tell me that was going to happen when they told me to ask the question. But anyway, that was, I learned a lot from that moment. Honestly, that changed the way that I hopefully managed and oversaw people in the future. Because like, man, I'm way more controlling than I even realized. But asking the question opened me up for some feedback that changed the way that I was leading. If you don't ask the question, you don't get the information. Questions are powerful. But something that I find fascinating is this, that Jesus asked a lot of questions. Jesus asked a lot of questions. And I really mean like a lot of them. There's a lot of different ways that you could count up what counts as a question. So there really isn't an exact number that I can give you of how many we have recorded, but it's at least hundreds. Some estimate as many as 350 questions. And what makes that number even more remarkable is that Jesus really only answers like a handful of questions. One person estimated that Jesus was 40 times more likely to ask a question than he was to answer one. That is an astounding reality. The fact that Jesus loved asking questions is the premise for the series that we're going to be in for the next couple of weeks. And each week we'll look at a different passage in the Gospels. And what each of these passages will have in common is that each of them will have a question that Jesus asks. And we believe that there is so much to learn about not only what he asked, but why he asked them, and all that kind of stuff, not only from the original audience, but also for us today. Today we're going to look at what is arguably the most important question that Jesus asked. It's found in Matthew chapter 16. If you want to go ahead and turn there, Matthew 16. Before we get to that passage, I'm just going to ask you to stick with me for a few minutes as we go on a little journey, because I want to dive deeper into this assertion that Jesus was more prone to ask a question than he was to answer it. I want to dive into that for a few minutes because that's very counterintuitive to me. Think about this, okay? This is how Jesus described himself in John chapter 14. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He describes himself as the truth. Why would the person who was the actual embodiment of truth himself, why would he not be an answers guy? Right? Why would he be a questions guy? The person who knew all the truth asked all the questions. That's very surprising to me. Because most of the time that we are asking a question, or at least I'm asking a question, it's because I don't know something, right? I'm trying to gain information. What's your name? Where did you grow up? What's the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? African or European? I don't know. We're trying to gather data. But Jesus, in his deity, he already knew everything. So why did he even bother asking questions? Well, I think it's because he understood something. And what he understood was this. He understood the power of questions. Jesus understood the power of questions. Because questions truly are powerful. And it's something that I think we don't think about all that often in a culture where we are just a Google search away from basically infinite knowledge. Right? There's almost nothing that you can't know within like 30 seconds on the internet. In fact, some of you haven't heard a single thing that I've said ever since I said it's kind of hard to know how many questions Jesus asked, and it's hard to estimate all the exact numbers. Some of you have been deep in a Google search rabbit hole since that moment, okay? And I get that. I am one of your people, all right? It's fine. Stay there as long as you want. You'll be there a while. You may be better off anyway. But the point is, Jesus knew that questions and answers are both powerful, but they're different. And so that means that they need to be used differently. Think about it this way, okay? If you're trying to give people a lot of answers, probably the best way to give a lot of answers is a lecture, right? It's a single person standing in front of a group of people giving prepared remarks for the purpose of conveying information, right? That would be a good way to do that. That's what we're doing right now. This is fundamentally not a dialogue. This is a monologue, right? That's how this works. The lecture is a very efficient means of delivering answers. If you think about it this way, a lecture, what's happening is that the audience is listening in order to comprehend. That's what happens in this kind of an exchange. That's what the audience does. They listen in order to comprehend. And what that means is that lectures, what they're best for, ultimately, is that lectures uncover facts. Okay, that's one of the ways that you can use this medium. And Jesus did this. We have recorded sermons from Jesus. He interpreted and explained Old Testament passages. He expounded what's right and what's wrong about sexuality and money and how we talk and all these different kind of things. So it's not that Jesus never did like a didactic lecture. He absolutely did. It just seems that he didn't primarily do this because he understood that questions are different from lectures and they do something else. questions, what happens with a question is that the audience is doing something different. The audience listens in order to respond. With a question, the audience is listening, but they're listening in order to be able to formulate some kind of a response. And so what that means is that questions are really best for uncovering hearts. Questions uncover our hearts. What you find out when you question someone is what's inside of them. If you ask someone a fact question, you find out what they know. If you ask someone a deeper kind of question, you find out who they are. And the scriptures teach this in Luke chapter 6. It says, out of the abundance of the heart, the internal component of who we are, out of the abundance or overflow of that, that's when the mouth speaks. We answer questions from the foundation of who we are. Jesus understood this. In fact, Jesus is the one who said this. And really, I think we all intuitively understand this when we're trying to teach other people. If you think about kids, or young people in general, if you've ever tried to teach a kid something, the easier and faster thing to do when a kid is trying to learn something, like let's say you're trying to teach them basic math, the easy thing to do is just answer the question for them. What's 2 plus 2? You just tell them the answer and then say it to them enough times that they maybe memorize their basic math tables that way. That can work as a way to teach math. But we know that it's much more powerful to ask the question, what's 2 plus 2, and then let them come to the answer by themselves, right? To think it through. It's slower. It's incredibly frustrating. Very frustrating. But it's ultimately better for them when you do it that way. And that's why our 6-year-old carries around a calculator all the time. But that's different. It's better for them if you let them come to the answer. Jesus understood all of these dynamics. And that's why the truth, the one with all of the answers, asked a lot of questions. But the truth is, he didn't ask them so he could learn. He asked so we could. Right? He didn't ask questions so that he could learn information. He asked so that we could. And we'll talk in a minute about what kind of an effect this approach had on other people. But I just think it's so profound that he chose to operate this way. Let's just take one example, okay? Jesus, at one point, he's teaching about how we tend to focus on the wrong things in life. So worldly success and achievement in life tends to come at the expense of our spiritual lives. In fact, sometimes we'll sacrifice our souls even for just accomplishing and achieving things in this life. And he's saying, look, that's not a smart way to live your life. That's not a smart way to plan for eternity. That's the point that Jesus is trying to make, is that we ought to prioritize our spiritual life over some achievement when those two things are at odds. And how Jesus could have said that point is this. He could have said, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. This is a really beautiful and poetic way to say the point that Jesus was making. This quote is amazing. I think it's brilliant in its sentence structure. It's powerfully worded. It conveys his point really well. It's more like a proverb or a saying. It reads like an answer. Okay? This statement, if you're familiar with it, it's deeply impacted many people. And the fact that it actually comes from Jim Elliot, a person who gave up that which he could not keep, his very life, for the spreading of the gospel, it makes this statement even more profound, right? It's incredible. It's a great way to express the idea. But I love what Jesus did in order to make this point, because it leverages questions and their potential. Here's how Jesus made this same point. He said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?" Really, that statement and this question, they make the same point. But this, in my opinion, is stunning. It's so simple, but it's haunting. Good luck getting that question out of your mind. Okay, because Jim Elliot's quote, I think that leaves you inspired, but this question from Jesus, it leaves you searching. The key difference is the fact that a question leaves the ball in your court. You now have to wrestle with it. You can't just accept it as true. He's asking you, hey, what does it profit a person? And now you've got to find a way to work that out. And look, I'm not saying that Jesus didn't make statements. I'm not saying the Jim Elliot quote isn't powerful. It is. It's amazing. I'm just pointing out Jesus masterfully deployed the power of questions. Questions showed up in his teaching. I'll give you a bunch of examples from his teaching where his questions showed up. He says, which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or to get up and walk? There's a good question he asked. Or why do you call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I say? That's a question from his teaching. Here's another one. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who's going to trust you with true riches? Ouch, that's a hard one. Or why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and you pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? These are times that Jesus is addressing a crowd, but he's asking them a question for rhetorical effect. But it wasn't just from the stage, as it were, that he used questions. He also asked questions as he was just interacting with folks in a normal conversation. He said, after 3 days, they found him in the temple. This is when he's a young man, sitting among the teachers. He's listening to them, and he, as a young person, was asking the teachers questions. He already knew the answers, but he's asking them questions. Another time, he said, hey, how do you read it? Or, do you want to get well? It's a question he asked somebody. Another time, what do you want me to do? Or, what do you want me to do for you? Or, what do you think? Or, do you love me? These are all just times Jesus leads with a question. But what do we learn from this? Like, what does it say about Jesus that despite the fact that he only had 3 years of public ministry, 3 years of opportunity on this earth, and yet he spent a lot of it allowing random people he was talking to like spew whatever nonsense came out of their mouth? What does that say about him? It's not what I would have expected. What effect did this have on people? Well, the questions of Jesus, I think, did at least 2 things. The first would be that the questions of Jesus displayed humility. Displayed humility. Jesus was willing to let the conversation flow at times. I mean, if you've ever been in like an MC, a missional community, or any kind of a small group environment, even like a focus group at work or something where like you're sitting in a circle and questions are being asked. When a question gets thrown out to a group of people who are sitting in a circle and looking at each other, you have no idea what some people are going to say. Okay? It gets crazy. It really does. We've all been there where they're just like somebody says something and we go off the rails. And somehow you're sitting in your chair hoping like with that GIF, you're just trying to like sink into your chair, like into the bushes. You know what I'm saying? Like, can I disappear from this moment, please? It is GIF, by the way. It's not GIF, so don't even come at me with that. But anyway. But Jesus, if he was the kind of person who was controlling, he was only after his own agenda, and he was trying to say his thing because he had limited time, he's got to get his words out, he's got to say his thing, well, he would have never asked questions of a group of people. Proud, controlling people do not let the room set the tone. They set the tone with their words. But Jesus was okay just sitting in the tension that a question will automatically produce. He showed his humility by allowing other people who were broken and confused and wrong and just rambling, he let them enter into a dialogue. But it also did something else. It displayed humility, but it also conveyed dignity. His questions conveyed dignity. Every time he asked a question, what he's proving is that he thought their perspective mattered. He thought their opinion was important, even when it was wrong. Have you ever been asked to share your opinion or maybe to give advice in a room or in a setting where you sort of feel like you're an imposter? Right? Like you don't really belong in this room, or someone that you really respect, they go around the table and they come to you and they say, so what do you think? Or what do you think we should do? Or, hey, I'm just coming to ask for your advice. And this is somebody that you look up to. And you're kind of like, I don't know what to say. Like simultaneously, I'm more terrified than I've ever been. And I also feel more seen than I've ever been in my life, like in a positive way. Right? That's what being asked your opinion from someone important does. Jesus did this every time he asked a question. He's conveying, I think you're intelligent enough to formulate an answer to this. I think you matter enough I want to know your answer. He allowed other people to speak in, to speak out, and when he did this, he afforded them the dignity of equality, the dignity of value. Let me summarize. Jesus, he asked a lot of questions, and I think the reason he did was because he ultimately understood the power of questions. What are the power of questions? Well, they compare with a lecture, and that a lecture is good for uncovering facts because people are listening in order to understand or comprehend. But questions are great at uncovering hearts because the audience has to listen in order to respond, and they reveal themselves when they do that. So Jesus understood this dynamic. He used questions a lot, and in using these questions, he accomplished two things, namely that he displayed his own humility and he conveyed dignity to the people he was speaking with. But throughout all of these questions, we have to be clear, he did not ask them so that he could learn. He asked questions so that we could. And it's in all of this as context that I want to look today at our passage in Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16, where I believe we'll uncover the most important question that Jesus ever asked. And I bet everyone else in the series is going to disagree with me on that, but that's fine. I went first. So here we go. Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. It starts this way. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples. Okay, so for context, Jesus is in the northern part of Israel. He's on his way up even further north, where he's going to be transfigured on the Mount of Transfiguration, if you're familiar with that story. Very soon, he's going to begin informing his disciples in no uncertain terms that he's going to go to Jerusalem, and when he gets there, he's going to be rejected, he's going to be killed by the religious leaders, and then he's going to rise again. He's going to start very clearly laying out what the future will hold. But before he does either of these defining moments in his earthly ministry, he takes a moment to do what I would almost describe as like checking the oil with his disciples. Okay? Right, like maybe right before you're going to take a long trip, maybe you traveled this past week for vacation. Before you get in the vehicle, it's a good idea to check the fluids, right? Make sure everything's kind of as it's supposed to be. And I think that really this is what Jesus is going to do. Because the temperature on their ministry and relationship is about to increase. It's going to get ratcheted up significantly. And so he's checking on his disciples to make sure that they sort of know where they are and what's going on in their view of him. And he doesn't do this with a lecture, he does it with a question, and that's so fascinating. Here's what he does. He asks his disciples this. He says, hey guys, who do people say that the Son of Man is? The Son of Man is one of Jesus' favorite terms for himself. So he's saying, who do people say I am? That's what he's asking. And this is a great opening question. It's great. Because if you know this passage, where he's going to go is a much more personal question. That's coming next. But there's nothing safer than starting off and asking people, hey, what do they out there think about this or that topic? Right? He's just trying to catch the vibe. Hey, what's the latest polling data out there say about me? That's a very easy thing to discuss. And they give a response kind of right away, and it's pretty mixed. Here's what they say. Like, well, hey, look, some people are saying you're John the Baptist. Some people say you're Elijah. Other people think you're Jeremiah or you're one of the prophets. Their answer is basically like, hey, Jesus, it's kind of all the usual suspects of who you might think people think you are. Various people, this list is mostly people who are known for a very iconoclastic message. They're known for prophetic power and disrupting the status quo. So what they're saying is you remind people of these prophetic voices. It's definitely a compliment about his level of influence in the culture. But it's interesting that nobody, apparently, is saying the right answer. The consensus among the disciples was that people, hey, they're really interested in you, Jesus. They are fascinated by you, Jesus, but apparently they're not believing in you. And I can picture Jesus kind of nodding and saying, yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah, cool, thanks, guys. That's really good. And then he hits them with the question that he was really getting to in the first place, which is the one that he wanted to check the dipstick and see what was going on in their hearts. He's like, oh, that's really good. Thank you, guys. Then he asked him, but who do you say that I am? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. That's what they're saying. Who do you say that I am? And now we're getting to the good stuff, right? Most people don't mind pontificating about what somebody out there thinks, especially if whoever's out there is wrong. It's easy to talk about that. This is a totally different question. Now the disciples are exposed. Whatever they say is going to reveal them to either be right or wrong. To show the group not just what they know, but who they are as a disciple of this rabbi, Jesus. And I can imagine that at least for a few seconds, you could probably hear a pin drop. Everybody was happy to weigh in, and now everybody's silent, and they're doing the thing where like, don't look at the teacher, don't look at the teacher, or like act like you're really deep in thought, and inside you're just like panic, 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 you know? And that's what a good question does. It's about to reveal their hearts. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but in any small group, again, where a question gets thrown up there, there's always one person in every group who cannot stand an awkward silence, right? And so they're just going to start blurting something out after like 3 seconds, and they would, even if they have no clue what they're about to say, they would rather make something up on the spot than sit here in an awkward silence, okay? There's always been one in every small group that I've ever been in, and that's because it's me, okay? It's me. I am the person. And for some of you, you're like, I am so glad you exist in the world. It means I don't have to talk. And others of you are like, what, just stop talking. I'll let you decide who my wife is, but okay. But Peter, he jumps in with an answer. His overeager self, he's always extra, ready to go. He pops in with this answer. Here's what he says. Simon Peter replied. He says, Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. In a moment of testing, where Jesus is trying to determine the status of his disciples' hearts, Peter jumps in with gusto, revealing what is in his heart, and honestly, kind of to our surprise, what's in there is actually a beautiful answer. It's actually the perfect answer. He says, Jesus, you are the Christ, which is just the Greek word for the Hebrew word Messiah. Messiah means the anointed one, or the chosen one, the rescuer, the one who was promised to be coming. He's going to fulfill all God's promises to rescue God's people. You're the Christ, he says. You're the Son of the living God. This is a statement of Jesus' deity, of his uniqueness in his relationship to God the Father, the Creator. He's saying, you came to us from God himself. This statement beautifully and succinctly and fully captures who Jesus is, where he came from, and what he's capable of. It's the perfect answer. And Jesus is thrilled. I mean, think about it. What a great moment for him as a rabbi. He's been teeing up this moment for his disciples. He wants to see how they're doing, test their hearts. And the vocal leader of the group steps up to the plate. We're talking bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded, and just cranks a grand slam. This is perfect. And Jesus, he responds back, he exclaims, he's like, yes, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, or son of Jonah. He says, flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you. My Father who is in heaven has revealed this to you. That's how perfect this answer is. This came from God. He affirms Peter's heart. He confirms that Peter is correct. And think about, to me, this is how cool this is. Jesus has just revealed the full truth of who he is, where he came from, what he's capable of. And he did it by asking a question. He didn't deliver a lecture. He didn't produce a white paper. He just threw it out to the group. Hey, who do you say I am? And the Father prompted Peter to say one of the most foundationally significant statements about Jesus that we have. One of the most important statements in the scriptures about Jesus and who he is doesn't even come from Jesus. It comes from a person that Jesus was asking a question to. That is so awesome. And Jesus, as he responds, he goes on to continue to lay out the battle strategy for the advancement of the church in the next age, how they can continue on with confidence in the plan to storm the gates of Hades, because he knows these people, they know who I truly am. He's checked the oil and the car is ready to drive. Peter had declared what needed declaring, that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. He's the Son of the living God. And that is the power of a question. Pause with me here for a second, though. What if Jesus had decided to approach this moment like I would have, or maybe like you would have? Imagine we're in this moment, we're about to launch into a phase, a very important ministry, very intense season of life, And I need to make sure, hey, my followers need to know exactly who I am, exactly where I came from, exactly what this mission is all about, and how to get it done. I'm about to give like the most important pre-mission brief of my entire career. I need to know deep down in their hearts, 2 a.m., I could wake them up, shake them, and tell me the answer, and they know it. If that's this moment, I know personally, I would have tried to write like a very rousing speech. Like I'm going to try to deliver one of these speeches that somebody gives like on horseback with a sword in the air. It's like, they can take our lives, you know? Or it's like, a day may come when the courage of men may fail, but it is not this day. Okay, I like Lord of the Rings, all right? That's probably what I would have done. Aragorn, Return of the King. It's like, ah. Or at the very end when he's like, my friends, you bow to no one, and all of the world of men bows to the hobbits. You're like, yeah. Maybe just me. I cried a lot in that movie, but that's what I would be assuming needs to happen. Like, this is the moment. It's got to go down in history. He could have done that. And if he did, it would have sounded something like this. He's like, hey, guys, hey, look, Jesus here. I need your eyeballs right on me. Let's talk about this. We got some big stuff coming down the road, okay? So I just want to check in with you. I know there's a lot of rumors out there about who I am, what I'm about, where I came from. It's like a lot of mixed messaging in our culture, and I just want you to know most people are wrong. In fact, some of what they're saying is a little concerning, and I would ask you what you think about who I am, but that makes me a little nervous too, because I'm pretty sure you're wrong as well. So let me just lay it out. I want, in no uncertain terms, here's what you need to know. Here's the truth. I'm the Messiah. I'm the Son of the living God. Okay? Do you have it? In fact, why don't you say it with me, disciples? And he's like, okay, I am the Messiah. I am the Messiah. The Son of the living God. The Son of the living God. Okay, get it? Got it? Are we good? Okay? Set? All right, we're set. And the disciples after would have been like, wow, hey, cool, thank you, Jesus. Like, maybe they would have done even a little clap, like, honestly, that was really good. Like, thank you. And somebody was, like, taking notes in the corner, and one dude was like, hey, actually, that was super tweetable. Are you cool? Like, can I go ahead and send that out on, like, the disciples' account? Is that fine? And she's like, yeah, that's fine. Get it out there, you know, I like that. It would have been a great moment. And Jesus made plenty of definitive statements about his identity and his mission, but we would have lost something if he had approached it that way. And what we would have lost is the transformative power of a game-changing question. Just like if someone asks you, will you marry me? And that transforms the course of the rest of your life. When Peter was forced to articulate an answer to the question, who do you say that I am? He is transformed. He becomes something different than he was before those words came out of his mouth. Now, ironically, the next words that come out of his mouth in this passage are words that actually get him rebuked by Jesus because he's totally wrong. But that just reminds us how patient Jesus is with the asking of questions. Peter's answer to this one big question about who is Jesus was a turning point. It sent him on a new trajectory. This single question changed the course of Peter's life, and in doing so, it literally changed the course of human history. So let me ask you a question. Knowing what we now know about questions and their power and their impact that they can have, who do you say that Jesus is? Who do you say he is? This is the most important question you could ever answer. I could hand you an answer. I could give it to you on a card as you walk out. I could force you to memorize it. But that's not what we're trying to do here. That wouldn't reveal what's in your heart. Who do you say that Jesus is? Not who do you pretend that he is. Who do you truly say he is? Not who did your parents believe him to be, or your Sunday school teacher, or your spouse. Not who do they say he is. Who do you truly say Jesus is today? And maybe you look at this question and you're like, honestly, I don't know. I've heard a lot of things, or maybe this is my first time in church, or the first time in a while, or somebody invited me, or maybe I've even been around for a while, but if I'm being honest, I haven't really articulated who I believe him to be for me or in the world in real life. And I just want to say thank you for being here. We're thrilled. In fact, we're here to make passionate, maturing followers of Jesus from here to the nations, and we would love to be helpful to you in answering what I believe to be the most important question you could ever answer. answering this question correctly according to the scriptures will change your life. If we only had one word to describe what we're all about here at Bay Area, it's Jesus. We would love to tell you more about him, introduce you to him, tell you how he has impacted our lives personally. Please let us be part of your journey. And talk to the person who invited you or at Guest Central afterwards. We just would love to help you discover from the scriptures the answer to the question, who is Jesus? But maybe you're here and you're part of the Bay Area family and you agree with Peter. You genuinely believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the promised one. He is the Son of God. And if that's the case, we're so glad that you're here as well, worshiping and connecting with our church family. But let me ask you two questions. If you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, the two questions would be, first, are you living like it? Are you living like it? If he's the promised one, if he's the Messiah, the one who was to come, what that means is that he gets to call the shots. If he's Lord, it changes everything. He doesn't get to be relegated to a small component or a pocket of what you do on the weekends or just maybe how you vote or just maybe how you use your money. It's got to be everything. That's what the statement inherently means, that he is the Messiah, the Son of God. If he's God, we've got a choice to make about how we live our lives. It will mean that everything has to be submitted to him. So even if you feel like, yep, I could take an exam right now, who is Jesus? And you might even be able to give the reference and where it comes up in all of the synoptic gospels of this same response. He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Are you living like it? The next question would be, are you sharing it? Are you sharing it? Peter ends up being one of the people who believed this statement wholeheartedly. He was one of a group of people who said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And when they saw him rise from the dead, they were released with passion into the world, and they ended up turning it upside down. They turned it upside down with the truth simply that Jesus is Lord. They turned the world upside down with the simple truth about who Jesus is. So I guess I'm wondering, have we turned our neighborhoods upside down yet? Is our influence felt in our families or in your school, in your class, among your coworkers? Is the answer to the question, who is Jesus, to you? Have you so profoundly answered that question according to the truth of the scriptures that you're sharing it, and people around you can't help but be influenced by the answer? Are you living like it? Are you sharing it? Jesus understood the power of questions because questions reveal our hearts. And I hope this question can reveal our hearts today and show us our next step. I want us to leave with this profound, piercing, haunting question on our minds and our hearts. Who do you say that Jesus is? Let me pray. Father, thank you that we are able to address you, that we're able to come together in freedom and speak openly about who you are and what you've done. And I ask that we would answer this question not rightly according to what society expects of us or what our family pressures indicate or what feels right in an emotional moment, but we'd answer this question properly according to what you've revealed yourself to be in the scriptures. And I ask that we would become more like you as a result. We'd surrender all components of who we are to you as a result, and then we would voraciously and boldly share that truth with the world around us. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. We have snacks that we would love for you to eat. Before you acquire snacks, please acquire your children and then acquire snacks with your children. Okay? Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next week.